I never thought a day would come when the person I loved the most would turn into a stranger in my own home. My wife, the woman I had trusted with my entire life, and my best friend, the man I had shared my deepest secrets with since childhood, were living a secret I had no idea existed, until the day the truth fell on me like a hammer. We had been inseparable, the three of us. My wife, Sarah, and I, married for 6 years, had what everyone envied: stability, love, comfort. My best friend, Daniel, was practically family. He had been there at every milestone, every celebration, every heartbreak. I had laughed with him, cried with him, celebrated promotions with him. I had trusted him with my life just as I had trusted Sarah. But trust, as I learned too late, can be both a blessing and a curse. It started subtly, though I didn't notice at first. Little things that seemed inconsequential. Daniel avoiding eye contact when Sarah and I were around, her texting more frequently in private, taking calls behind closed doors. I dismissed it because my world was perfect, or so I thought. I told myself that I was imagining things. I wanted to believe in the people I loved. Then one night, I returned home earlier than expected from work. The house was unusually quiet. Sarah's car was in the driveway, but Daniel's was not. I found her in the kitchen, pretending to cook. I smiled, kissed her forehead, and asked about her day. She smiled back, but something in her eyes made me pause. Fear? Guilt? I didn't know, and I let it slide. Weeks later, a message appeared on my phone. It was from Daniel. I opened it casually, expecting one of his usual jokes, but the words froze me instantly. I can't wait until tonight. No one will know. Not even him. I stared at it, rereading it over and over, hoping my mind was playing tricks. But the feeling in my chest told me otherwise. A part of me wanted to confront him immediately, to rage and yell and demand answers. Another part, darker and colder, told me to wait. I chose to wait. For weeks I watched. I observed. Every interaction between Sarah and Daniel, every glance, every hidden smile. I saw the way she avoided me when he called, the way he lingered just a second too long when I wasn't looking. And the more I watched, the more I realized that my worst fears were true. They were cheating. My wife, the woman who had promised me forever, and my best friend, the man who had sworn loyalty, were betraying me in a way I could never have imagined. But I didn't confront them. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't even leave. I stayed. I stayed because I had a plan. A plan that required patience, silence, and letting them dig their own grave. I began to subtly manipulate situations, planting seeds of doubt and discord. I would forget to mention plans or dates, making them feel unseen. I allowed their paranoia to grow naturally, never touching a thing myself. I watched as they became careless, arrogant in their belief that I would never discover their deception. Arguments began, small at first, almost unnoticeable. I would overhear them through the walls, tension growing like a storm. Daniel accused Sarah of caring too much about me. Sarah accused Daniel of being too controlling. Every word, every quarrel, every slight misunderstanding was a thread I was quietly weaving into a noose. And then came the moment they thought they had won. They believed I was oblivious, that I was still the trusting fool they had always known. But that night everything changed. I had arranged a little surprise for Sarah. A gift she had been hinting at, something I knew she would cherish. I placed it where she would find it, just as planned. When she opened it, Daniel was there, hiding in the shadows, ready to meet her secretly. But I was already watching. Through the reflection in the hallway mirror, I saw their faces, their excitement, their fear, and most importantly, their overconfidence. I let them revel in it for a while, letting them forget that someone else was watching. Days later, small slips began. Daniel forgot to hide messages. Sarah left traces of her lies. Friends started noticing subtle changes in behavior, whispering questions, innocent comments. I let the world act as my instrument of revenge. I didn't need to touch them. Their own arrogance and selfishness did the work. And slowly it all began to collapse. Arguments escalated. Daniel became paranoid, convinced that someone was watching, someone was waiting to expose him. Sarah panicked, realizing that the careful balance she had maintained was crumbling. Trust between them eroded. Every lie, every secret, every stolen moment turned into fuel for their destruction. And through it all I stayed calm. I smiled. I nodded. I lived my life in peace, untouchable, while they tore themselves apart. I remember the day it all ended vividly. Daniel stormed out, slamming doors, threatening to tell everyone. Sarah begged, cried, tried to manipulate me into forgiveness. But I had no anger left, only a quiet satisfaction. They had destroyed themselves just as I had known they would. I walked away free. Not just free from them, but from the pain of betrayal, from the chaos they had created, from the poison of dishonesty. I had my life, my peace, and most importantly, my dignity. And they were left with nothing but each other, and the realization that some betrayals are punished not by rage, but by the cold, patient silence of the one they hurt most. After that night, I realized the extent of their arrogance. They truly believed that I was still the trusting fool they had always known. But I was no longer that man. I had become something sharper, quieter, a silent observer armed with knowledge and patience. I didn't need to confront them to feel power. Watching them unravel was enough. Days turned into weeks, and the air in our home grew heavier. I noticed subtle shifts. Sarah's hesitation when she spoke to me, Daniel's casual attempts at covering his tracks, now bordering on clumsy. It was almost beautiful in a twisted way, the way a carefully constructed lie begins to crack under its own weight. I started planting little coincidences around the house. A note left carelessly on the kitchen counter, a forgotten gift in an unexpected drawer, a message I happened to see at the wrong moment. Small things, inconsequential on their own, but enough to make them second-guess each other, to make them feel that the walls were closing in. I became a ghost in my own home, moving silently, unseen, while the people who had betrayed me stumbled blindly. I also noticed that friends and family began picking up on something. Subtle comments, passing questions. "Are things okay between you two? I thought Daniel was coming over tonight." Innocent observations, yet they fed the growing paranoia between Sarah and Daniel. I let those moments pass without interference, knowing the tiny seeds of doubt would grow into a storm. And grow they did. Arguments became routine. Not loud, not dramatic, but tense, filled with quiet venom. Daniel accused Sarah of overthinking, of not trusting him enough. She accused him of being controlling, of not caring what happened to me. And all the while, I listened, I watched, I allowed the web of lies and secrets to tighten around them. There were nights I would lie awake, hearing their whispered arguments through the walls. I learned things I never wanted to know. The lies, the betrayals, the small cruelties they had inflicted on each other in their pursuit of selfish desires. And yet, I didn't intervene. I remained patient. It was during this period that I realized the true power of silence. People who believe they are untouchable will eventually destroy themselves. They will expose their own flaws, their own weaknesses, and in doing so, they will unravel entirely. I didn't need to raise a hand. The universe had taken my place as the instrument of justice. I remember the first time Sarah came to me visibly shaken. She had just had a fight with Daniel over some minor slip-up, something about a forgotten message. Her eyes, once filled with arrogance, now held a flicker of fear. I don't know what's happening with us," she admitted, almost whispering. I nodded, saying nothing more than a simple calm, "I'm here if you need me." That's all it took. She didn't realize it, but the weight of my silence crushed her. Every lie she had told, every betrayal she had committed, was now a weapon pointed at her own heart. And Daniel, too, began to crumble. He started making mistakes, being careless with his phone, being sharp with words, revealing things he never should have. I watched all of this unfold like a chess game, every piece moving as predicted. I never interfered directly, never confronted, never accused. The suspense of their own paranoia and guilt became their undoing. It wasn't instantaneous. It took months. Months of observing, months of letting them expose themselves. But I had all the time in the world. I was no longer a man caught in rage or heartbreak. I had transformed into something else. A quiet force, waiting, patient, inevitable. And then the collapse began. Not sudden, not dramatic, but unstoppable. Arguments turned into shouting matches. Secrets spilled in moments of frustration. Daniel accused Sarah of manipulating him. Sarah accused Daniel of betrayal he hadn't committed yet but would inevitably do in his panic. I could hear it all from the kitchen, from the study, from the bedroom, and I felt nothing but a deep, unshakable calm. One evening, the final blow arrived. Daniel, in a fit of rage, confronted Sarah about a message he found, something trivial but enough to ignite the firestorm. Sarah, panicking, tried to cover, tried to twist the narrative, but every word she spoke only dug the hole deeper. They both realized too late that the house they had built on lies was collapsing. And I was free. I walked among the ruins, untouched, untarnished, watching the chaos they had created, knowing I had orchestrated nothing, yet had orchestrated everything. The house had grown colder even when the sun poured through the windows. I could feel the tension lingering in every corner, an invisible weight pressing on me and on them. It was almost poetic, the way their betrayal had begun to consume them from the inside out, leaving only paranoia, guilt, and fear behind. Daniel had begun to lose control. The arrogance that had once made him so bold was now a fragile veneer, cracking under the pressure I had silently orchestrated. He started making mistakes he could never take back. Calls left unanswered, messages accidentally seen by the wrong people, lies he could not remember fabricating. Sarah too had transformed. The confidence and charm she had wielded to manipulate, to deceive, to seduce, had eroded into something frantic and brittle. Every glance she cast at me was measured, cautious, as if I were some omniscient judge watching her every move. One night, the inevitable moment arrived. They had left their phones on the kitchen counter, a rare lapse in vigilance. I walked by casually, pretending to look elsewhere, but I saw everything. Daniel's texts to her, her messages to him, the timelines, the confessions, the hidden plans. Every piece of evidence I needed was right there. I didn't take screenshots, I didn't yell, I didn't confront. I simply left the room and let fate take over. The next morning, the collapse began in earnest. A friend, unrelated to the affair, commented innocently about how awkward Daniel and Sarah had been acting lately. The words were harmless, meaningless even, but in the minds of the guilty, they became a bomb waiting to explode. Daniel turned on Sarah, accusing her of overreacting. Sarah lashed back, defensive, terrified that someone would discover the truth. Every argument was magnified, every slip magnified, until they were no longer conspirators in crime but enemies trapped in a cage of their own making. I watched from the living room, a cup of coffee in hand, listening to the chaos. I didn't intervene, didn't speak, didn't even make eye contact. I was invisible. Yet I could feel the power I held simply by being present. They were unraveling, and I had done nothing but remain patient. And then it happened. The first public crack. Daniel, desperate to reclaim control, had posted something careless on social media. A photo, a comment, a half-truth he thought no one would notice. But someone did notice. Sarah's name was mentioned indirectly, and suddenly their private world began to leak into the public eye. Friends messaged. Family questioned. Rumors started. And in the middle of it all, they turned on each other, blaming the other for their exposure, forgetting the very lies that had brought them together in secrecy. I could see the panic in their eyes now, real panic, not the casual lies of before. Daniel confronted Sarah in the living room, voice trembling, face red with fury. How could you do this to me? How could you let this happen? He shouted as if she were entirely to blame. Sarah, usually so quick with words, froze. Then she tried to speak, to defend herself, but it came out as a tangled mess of accusations and half-truths. It was perfect. Every word, every gesture, every falter, a testament to their destruction. And all I did was watch. Days passed, and the house fell into a strange silence. Not peace, but a tense, suffocating quiet. They no longer looked at me the same way. They avoided eye contact, avoided conversations, avoided any acknowledgement of what they had done. Yet every glance they threw at each other was loaded with fear, mistrust, and hatred. The betrayal that had once been hidden in shadows was now laid bare, festering and burning them from within. Then came the final revelation. Daniel, in a last-ditch attempt to reclaim control, tried to manipulate Sarah into confessing everything to me, hoping perhaps that I would side with him or that he could redirect the blame. But the more he pushed, the more evidence of their betrayal came to light. Words they thought were secret became proof of their deceit. Messages they thought were deleted resurfaced. Friends and acquaintances inadvertently confirmed timelines, alibis, and hidden meetings. Aunt Sarah, realizing the house of cards was collapsing, began to panic. She tried to apologize, to explain, to beg, but her words rang hollow. Every apology was met with disbelief, every explanation unraveling under scrutiny. Daniel, seeing the unraveling of their carefully built narrative, grew desperate, lashing out, blaming her, blaming me, blaming anyone and everyone except himself. In that moment I finally spoke. Not with anger, not with tears, not with confrontation, but with calm, icy clarity. "It's over," I said simply. No accusations, no dramatics, just a statement of fact. And it was. The air shifted instantly. The tension, the fear, the guilt, it all fell onto them, leaving me untouched, free from the poison they had created. I didn't need to do more. They had destroyed themselves. They had destroyed each other. And I had been patient enough to let it happen naturally, letting their arrogance, their lies, and their betrayal be the instruments of their own downfall. I walked away from that house later that evening, leaving them to deal with the wreckage of their choices. Their secrets were exposed. Their trust was shattered. Their friendship was gone. And their love, if it had ever been real, was dead. For the first time in months I felt peace. I didn't celebrate. I didn't gloat. I simply existed in the quiet knowledge that the truth had revealed itself, that justice, in its own patient way, had been served, and that I was finally free. The days that followed were surreal. The house, once filled with laughter, warmth, and casual conversation, now echoed only with the remnants of broken trust. Sarah and Daniel moved through it like ghosts, avoiding each other, avoiding me, avoiding the uncomfortable truth that had been laid bare. Their once perfect secret life had crumbled into fragments, sharp and painful, leaving them with nothing but regret. I watched from a distance, not with malice, not with joy, but with quiet detachment. There is a unique satisfaction in observing consequences unfold naturally, without interference, without drama. They had built their world on deception, and it had collapsed entirely under its own weight. There was no need for me to interfere. The universe had been more patient than I could have been. Sarah became withdrawn. The charm and confidence she had wielded like a weapon had vanished. She started to question everything, her decisions, her relationships, even her own worth. The realization of what she had done, the depth of her betrayal, and the exposure of her actions to people she thought she could manipulate left her isolated. Friends who had once laughed with her now treated her with a distant caution, sensing the change, sensing the truth she could no longer hide. Daniel, too, fell apart, though differently. He was consumed with anger, frustration, and humiliation. The betrayal he had once justified in his mind now reflected back at him tenfold. Every attempt to rebuild, to justify, to manipulate failed miserably. He had underestimated the power of silence, underestimated the consequences of arrogance, underestimated the inevitability of truth. I, on the other hand, was free. Not in the sense that I had won some petty revenge, but in the sense that I had reclaimed something far more valuable. My peace, my dignity, my clarity. I no longer felt the sting of betrayal or the desire for confrontation. Those emotions, so powerful in the beginning, had dissipated like smoke, leaving only calm certainty. I started living again, fully and unapologetically. I traveled, I worked, I laughed, I experienced life without the shadow of deception looming over me. Every step forward was a step away from the toxic energy of their betrayal. I didn't need to celebrate their downfall. I merely existed in the quiet knowledge that truth had done its work. Time, as it always does, began to heal what could be healed. The scars remained, subtle but present, reminders of the pain and lessons learned. I reflected often on the experience, understanding that betrayal is not just an act against love, it is a test of patience, resilience, and character. How one responds to such acts defines the rest of their life. And I chose patience. I chose observation. I chose silence. In doing so, I discovered a strength I never knew I possessed. I realized that revenge does not always require action, that justice does not always demand confrontation. Sometimes the quietest steps, the measured restraint, and the unwavering calm are the most powerful forces of all. Sarah and Daniel eventually drifted apart entirely, unable to reconcile the wreckage they had created. Their friendship ended, their love dissolved, their lives forever altered by the choices they had made. And I moved on, carrying nothing but lessons, wisdom, and the profound understanding that betrayal, no matter how deeply it cuts, cannot touch the soul of one who refuses to be broken. Looking back now, I see the entire experience as both a tragedy and a revelation. Tragic because of the pain inflicted, the trust shattered, the relationships lost. Revelatory because it showed me who I truly was, who I could become when faced with deception, when faced with a choice between anger and composure, between chaos and peace. I learned that silence can speak louder than words, that patience can be a weapon stronger than any act of vengeance, and that true freedom comes not from retaliation, but from understanding, acceptance, and the quiet assertion of one's own integrity. And in the end, as I walked away from the ruins of what had once been, I felt something extraordinary: liberation. Not the fleeting satisfaction of seeing them suffer, not the temporary thrill of revenge, but a deep, enduring freedom. I was no longer tied to their lies, their deceit, their games. No longer defined by their choices. I was my own person, whole, unshaken, and at peace. Some nights, I still think of Sarah and Daniel, imagining the empty tension in their lives, the echoes of arguments, the paranoia they carry. And I smile, not with cruelty but with quiet understanding. They were architects of their own destruction. I was merely a witness, patient, calm, and certain of the inevitable truth. The ultimate lesson I carry with me is this: betrayal can never touch the core of a soul that refuses to bend, the heart that chooses patience over rage, the mind that observes instead of reacts. Some wounds heal, some scars remain. But the strength to rise above, to reclaim yourself, and to walk away unbroken, that is the greatest revenge of all. If you connect with stories of betrayal, resilience, and ultimate redemption, make sure to subscribe to Dark Infidelity Stories. Hit like, share, and leave a comment. Your support keeps these real, raw stories alive.